going back to your earlier years, like I don't know, what does the word jazz mean to you? I mean, me and you could walk up and down the streets of Huntington Beach or Long Beach or San Francisco and ask people what their definition of the word jazz is, and we get 20 different answers. What is your definition?
Um, Jazz to me is self-expression, um, listening. Um, it's like you said, it can be interpreted of many different ways, but improv, a lot of syncopation, um, but it's a language, and I think it's a very thorough language that to really consider yourself a jazz musician is a lifelong study. And so jazz in a whole isn't just a word with a definition. It is a lifestyle.
That lifestyle for many cats, back in the 50s, um, I've interviewed quite a few cats that were from that bebop era. So many of them were like, "Oh, Bird is all strung out." That's how he probably gets his sound. A lot of them became junkies. They thought that was the jazz life. Then they'd be able to sound like Bird. Bird used to say, don't do what I say, don't do what I do. And there were plenty of cats who didn't do any drugs. But I mean, the jazz like in today's world, I know you're not a jazzer. Obviously, it's so hard to even make a living playing this music because it's not popular music anymore. But I just wanted to go back to this idea of in jazz, because one word you didn't use, though I know you know this. I mean, jazz it's about dynamics. So feathering is very essential within the jazz context, whether you're playing an original tune or something out of the American songbook. So it just is the best you can in your own situation, whether you're playing Afrobeat or world music, Mardi Gras Indian music, funk, whatever. How does feathering the bass drum open up the pocket and the groove collectively? I have a hard time today with people who just are like using the bass drums as like machine guns. There's no dancing on the kit. How is dancing on the kit? How does dancing on the kit open up a more, you know, generic style of music like rock or funk?
Well, I mean, instead of, like you said, instead of being something that's overpowering the rest, like say for instance on a backbeat, and like a lot of hip hop, they'll be taking jazz samples and stuff, and they'll be you know pulling that up, and so the kick drum is very present. In jazz, when you're kind of floating it, and in my interpretation, that when you're floating it, you're leaving more space, you're letting somebody else talk, you're letting somebody else express themselves, but then still giving that low end thump, that feel that you get, to kind of just not to reset a
Hmm.
phrase, but more of to just add language to it, being another part of it, not a definitive part of the song, or to reset a measure or something like that. It's you're basically using it as another drum. So when you talk about floating, and you're going back to this, is you're just playing it like every other drum. Say you're playing the ride cymbal, you can play it really soft, you can play it really hard, you can play the snare drum, say for instance ghost notes. You're basically playing ghost notes like you do on a snare, but you're doing it on a kick drum. So it's like any other stroke that you have, and it's how it needs to be applied, if
Having
that
a
makes
ball.
any
Yeah, no, I
sense.
mean you're riffing right now. I'm loving it. I sent you a clip. You probably didn't right before our interview. You probably didn't have, it was really because I was reading that you did play with Big Chief Monk Boudreaux. Is that true?
Yeah, we recorded a record with him.
It's just so we'll get into that in a minute, but it's so cosmic. Of course, this is just the way I've been operating for the last years. Just the synergy. There is no coincidence. And last night I'm like looking at my archives and I'm like, wait a minute, I never uploaded my Big Chief Monk Boudreaux interview because I'm very good friends with Johnny Vidakovich. You know
Oh yeah,
Johnny?
he's in.
Okay, I mean the
I
guy's
I
yeah.
yeah, I don't know him personally, but I definitely know him and his playing, and I mean, yeah,
Well,
he's a
when you
legend.
when you're going back to New Orleans, let me know because you guys can go out for a nice Italian dinner. The guy is a
All right.
legendary character, man. But he
Beautiful.
so he hooked me up with Monk a while ago, and so I'm digging. This is last night, and I had not really done any research for our interview, so I didn't know anything about this. And I uploaded. I found the file. I was frantic. I found it, uploaded it to YouTube, was listening back to it, and he talked about. I put up a quote. I put up that clip that I sent you on Instagram because he was talking about. He goes, "Cats today, when they are in a drum circle, you know, they all want to be heard." He goes back then,
Right.
he goes, it's not about that. He's like, you don't beat the drum. You play
Right.
the drum. You talk to each other with the drum. You don't beat the drum because you're still going to be heard if you beat the drum. Ain't nobody going to listen. And
Right.
it was just like so hip. And, this guy's coming up with like, handmade tambourines, makeshift tambourines, the bars in New Orleans, they're playing on the top of cigarette
Yeah.
machines. I mean, they didn't have a
Yeah.
trap. They didn't have a trap drum. And so my before we get into Monk, did you have an experience early on where because what you were talking about with the drum kit before with the ghost notes, like the drums is not the lead instrument; it's an accompanist instrument. It's part of the milieu. It's part of the conversation. And what I just wanted you to talk about when your ears grew the most on the bandstand to the point when you recognized that it was about playing the drums because if you beat the drums, you're going to be heard, but you're not going to get called back for the gig and no one's going to be listening to
Right. Right. Now, listening has always been an important part of my career. I can't tell you with some of the groups that I play with, the drums are very dominant in the sense that that is the drive.
you. Yes.
They're loud bands, a lot of percussion, loud guitars, loud bass, that sort of thing. So playing the drums loud is important. That's kind of, that's relevant for that music. In my early years of learning about that was obviously dynamics and listening to people. There was an artist that I was playing with, Emily Wells, who she plays, all sorts of instruments, but it all came around to looping, with violin and quiet instruments and things
Wow.
like that. So dynamics was very important. And listening to what she was doing was very important. And I was accompanying her with my sounds. So it wasn't always necessarily like a backbeat, it's closer to where you would say jazz because it has a little bit more of a free flow, not necessarily improvisation, but more of listening to what's around you and fitting into where you're needed. So if you're not listening, then obviously the whole thing's going to fall apart. And that moved on to everything that I was doing. When you have dynamics, if every other player goes down, you know, and you're sitting here in your own world playing, louder, then you're destroying the whole song,
Right.
like you said, like you're not there to be heard. You're not the showcase of the thing and everybody else is under you. It is really about just listening to what's around you and playing to that dynamic.
Um, and going a step further, because I'm just a 45-year-old cat, but I've woodshedded pretty hard with, it's clear that you have an inclination towards, uh, the rhythms of the motherland, African rhythms. You mentioned
Mm-hmm.
Bela Kuti and that kind of stuff. And, you know, so many of the Mardi Gras Indians and a lot of those, I mean, they refer to it as Santeria, but that's a Latin name for, spiritual drumming in Cuba. So much of it is about communication and language, back and forth. It's not even, they're not playing, My Funny Valentine. They're literally communicating, which was such a threat to the slaveholders and honestly the Europeans. When the Europeans took over the Louisiana Purchase from the French. I mean, if a slave was caught with a drum, they had their hands cut off. So my question is, have you been exposed have you been in situations musically where, you know, it was literal, like it was a spiritual discharge. It was a spiritual drumming community where um you may not, again, it was about language. You may not have been hip to all the language, but people were clearly doing a lot of call and response and a lot of talking to each other.
Oh, yeah. I can say so. In January, I got the opportunity to go and play music down in Cuba with my group Jungle Fire. And while we were down there, it was very eye-opening. I'm aware and familiar with, some of the rhythms and stuff, but when you're actually there, of the birth of the Cuban music,
Yeah,
I mean, that's what it's all about is the communication. You have the batas, you have the conga, every everything that is being played has its place, and the communication between all the drums and the way that they're playing off each other, and it's a full language. It's all language. And obviously I'm just standing there in awe and trying to trying to see
oh,
what's
I
going
did,
on. and
I
and
did,
I
yeah.
mean it's a whole nother thing. So to actually be there and experience it, of course I play with some people that are, you know maestros of Cuban music. But I mean, they studied for years and years and constantly still learning, But it is a language. Like you're not going to be able to sit in and play anything like that unless you know the language. That's it. Bottom line. It's like if you're trying to learn Spanish, well, you got to learn Spanish. If you're trying to speak Italian, like you got to learn Italian, and that's exactly what that is. Percussion itself. I mean, or as you mentioned, drum circles or um that's all language. You're not going off and jibber jabbering about stuff while they're actually having a conversation. You're out.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, like
You're out.
like what I'm not a musician. I mean, I play conga drums, but I mean, I just jam, But we couldn't have had this high level of a conversation when I first started my show. When I go back and listen to, my interviews with Jack D, Jeanette, other people like that. I mean, I knew that I wanted to create a niche, but I didn't have my voice. I didn't have the language. I didn't have the knowledge. The knowledge is the language. I guess, some people would say, well, if you want to learn Italian, then, just go to Rome and immerse yourself in the culture for 6 months or a year and you'll figure it out. Or Chinese, go to Taiwan. But in some of these sacred ceremonies, especially in Cuba, like, I mean,
They're telling
they're
stories.
they are, and they're secret kind of. I mean, that you can't, how would you particularly, if you wanted to learn that language? I mean, would you be allowed to dwell in one of these communities for months at a time, or is it so sacred that they're like, you know, no?
I mean, it is very sacred. Especially, that yeah, a lot of it is community, and it is very sacred. The way that you treat your drums, the way that you treat other people's drums, the way that that sort of thing, and to really become trusted, you do have to live in it. You have to be trusted into their lives and communities. I'm not speaking on anybody's behalf, but
Of course.
just from what I've experienced, it is, yeah, you're not just like this musician coming in and be like, all right, teach me this. And it's like, what? Who are you? Like, why do you
Yes.
deserve to learn our language? And it really isn't just like knowing somebody or knowing people and really showing a desire to learn. If you show and it's like, oh yeah, I want to learn a few things. I want to learn this. They're just like, no, that's that. No, it's about people that want this in their life, want to learn this religion, to learn this culture, to, it's a lot more of that. So yeah, you're right in a sense that it's secret, but it's not necessarily secret. It's a very sacred thing. And, it's not to be treated lightly. It has to be very well respected. And in order to be respected, you have to show respect.
You're absolutely right. How did you guys get even connected to one of these? I mean, to me, it's like you go to Cuba and it's like there's so much gentrification and pop stuff, but then so you really got to know some cats down there. Were you connected to some people down there that were able to get you to see the real stuff?
Yeah. So in our group Jungle Fire, one of the members, Alberto Lopez, who I mean, he's an incredible musician and very knowledgeable of all different languages, and but he studied down there for quite
Oh,
some time.
oh,
He and a couple of his friends and whatnot, but yeah, they studied down there. They lived there. They lived the Cuban life and studied every single day. He would go have a lesson, go home and practice, and then go play a show, and then do that over and over and over again. He could tell you much more stories and stuff, but from what I've learned from him is that it is constant dedication to it,
but
and
he's the one that still had friends down.
exactly. So
Yeah,
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 he
yeah.
he he still knows a lot of people down there, and there's some other people, and really it was for the Jazz Fest, and
Wow.
and obviously, I mean, there's not a lot of money, and we kind of just saved up, but we got the invitation, and of course we jumped on it. We went down there. We got to perform in front of beautiful people, and be part of the community, and I mean, it was quite a life experience. I hope to do it again. If I don't, at least I got to do it
Hey
once.
man,
But
you did it already, man. Yeah,
you know,
man, it's sick. That's awesome, dude. No,
yeah.
I mean, were you, you know, you can riff on this any way you want, but I mean, you go back to uh Cal Jader records, you had Mongo, Willie Bobo, and then so you had congas, timbales. You didn't even really have on some of the records, you didn't even have a full trap set, a full drum set. Were you were you playing your own tunes, your band's tunes, or were you on stage with a modified kit?
No. Well, are you talking specifically for Cuba?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Because obviously there's not a lot of money to buy
No.
things, or the resources to get it. So,
Huh.
of course, traveling down there, we brought a bunch of sticks and heads and things, some percussion stuff. But that's the beautiful thing down there is they work with what they have,
I
you
know.
know.
It's so
So
sick.
so I was lucky enough that yeah, for the Jazz Fest, it's a little different. They get what they have. Um, so I did have a trap kit. Now I'm not going to say it was the best trap kits I ever had, but
These are my
you
favorite
deal.
kits are the ones, yeah, my favorite kits are the sloppy one. I
Yeah,
love those kits.
I
Yeah.
love it. And just if you don't have a specific cowbell or a go-go or something, they make their own. If like you've always seen in videos and stuff, people using a bucket or a container for a kick drum, and you use a stack of metal for a hi-hat,
Absolutely,
or
dude. Absolutely.
it you don't have to have like a DW kit, a Gretsch kit, or brand new or anything like that. Like you don't have to have it. You use what you can, and obviously you see that it makes beautiful music with whatever you have. So of course, if you have the resources for a brand new kit and whatnot, then of course. But I mean, me for myself, like a lot of recordings and stuff is dirty as pretty, like just old kits and tea towels, and I got a beater that's the wool's pretty much gone, but it sounds good, so you kind of just leave it. It's yeah. I mean, you find down there that yeah, you may have a kit. Our bass player might have a bass amp. Oh, maybe not. He'll just play through a little 10-inch crate. You deal with it and you make what you can out of it.
No, it's really well said, and it's funny because I'm not sure if you ever ran across the legendary percussionist Emil Richards, who was like and he did hundreds of studio sessions, played with
Hmm.
Sinatra, Basie, Shearing. I mean, was just this zany psychedelic percussionist, and he had I was very close with him, and he used to say, he's like Milt Jackson, the vibes player. He's like Milt had the saddest looking vibes in the world. Like it just they looked so sad, and then he'd get on those vibes, and the sound that he could generate out of that was astounding. I mean, it was just
Yeah.
you did not, and you're talking about this. So this is sort of um, this is not a technical question, but in general, you just talk about again, going back to Monk yesterday, he said it what because they didn't have any real, they were putting stuff together with their hands.
Yeah,
They didn't have anything. He goes, but it was about if you could get the sound, that's all
that's
that
all that
mattered.
mattered.
So my
Exactly. That's
question
all
really
that.
is
Yeah.
how have you learned, talk a little bit about the pulse, the heartbeat, the soul that allows you, even in not perfectly desirable circumstances, maybe a terrible PA or you have a sad looking kid or whatever. Can you talk about how you generate volume sonically through soul and like physical life force?
Hmm. Physical life force.
That's like, I
Um,
mean, when like Milt, like the minute he got on those vibes, as pathetic and sad as they looked, there he
yeah.
was. That was his life force right there.
Yeah. Well, it created the sound. You know, you have to think that in a situation that it's like, okay, say I'm throwing a drum kit that only produces so much velocity,
Right. Right.
and of course, depending on how hard you play something, is going to change the sound, like if you're playing, say you had a tub as a kick drum, well, the harder you hit it isn't necessarily mean that it's going to be the loudest. There's a sweet spot for it.
Hmm.
You could be choking it too much. Just that sort of thing. Any drum kit, a certain type of snare is going to have a different velocity. So the way I see it is that when you're on stage, again, it goes back to the listening, that if something doesn't have the velocity or the volume of something else, well, then you're going to have to bring it back a little so that that person can speak, and
Exactly.
that's what creates the energy. So if I have a kit that's just not loud, but everything else is loud and you're just putting the energy there. If I got to dig, I'm going to dig. That's where it comes, kind of punk rock or some Afro rock, to where you're
Oh
just
yeah.
laying into it
Oh
and
yeah.
you get a different sound. And then maybe that sound is what that needed. If it's just this trashy kit, but you're just laying into it while while the bass player is driving, that's going to be its own sound. It may not be the sound that exactly what you want, but your energy that you're playing is coming through, so it's
And
kind
that's
of,
what I wanted to I want
yeah.
no, and like that's extremely well articulated. I just have you learned, can you just talk about in your evolution, to me, you're talking about it's the energy coming through you. And sometimes, especially with less seasoned cats or even a lot of musicians who have been doing this for a long time, they feel like they're completely responsible for the information coming through them via singing or their apparatus, when in fact they're only partially responsible for it. And
Mhm.
part of it's about getting out of your own way to allow the information to come through you. Was there a pivotal moment in your career where you kind of realized that if you could figure out, I mean, it doesn't always work out seamlessly, but that when you got out of your own way, you were able to channel information through you coming through, from the heavens. You were basically a conduit.
Yeah, I mean that's where you just got to get out of your own head and the questions that you're questioning yourself while you're playing.
Well, yeah,
you're
like early on, like can you talk about a time early in your career when there was a lot of sort of mental chatter and ultimately like how you learned to cultivate that sort of emptiness or stillness or that void that just allows you to be a vessel?
Yeah. I can tell you when I first joined Orgone back in the day, it was kind of like it was a big thing for me because it was a new direction and a new set of people that I was playing with. And so, it's very, nerve wracking. I was
Yeah.
nervous. And then you start playing these shows in front of a bunch of people. And, I was used to performing in front of large audiences, but when you're approaching something new and you haven't really, you know, played with these people before and expressing it, you're in your head thinking like, okay, this part's coming up. Okay, don't mess up this fill. Okay, don't do this. Oh,
Right, right,
did they,
right.
it's like, is Dan thinking that this part's wrong? Oh, did I miss this ghost note? Those sort of things. And then you kind of just got to say, okay, just shut your mind up, listen to what everybody else is playing. The groove. Just start with the groove. Don't think about other things. Remember the breaks, hit the breaks. And then over time, that starts to develop and it allows you to stop listening to that other voice in your head that's constantly, asking questions, or, being being that second mind that's saying, "Are you sure this is right? Are you sure this is
Right,
right?"
wanting to
You
be
kind of,
perfect and stuff. Yeah,
yeah, you
exactly.
want it to
Yeah,
be perfect,
yeah,
but you're not going to be perfect if you're sitting there listening to yourself in your own head while everybody else around you is moving forward. So instead of stressing yourself out with that, just it's the confidence. You know that you know it, and then you just got to listen to everybody else and move along with them. Because if you're sitting here thinking the whole time, then you may not be in the groove. And if you're not in the groove, then you can throw other people off. So yeah. It's
that's a
really about
beautiful. I
just
mean, were
relaxing. Yeah.
were you was a lot of that story with some of the older cats, it would be accompanied by like somebody in the band maybe coming over at a certain point, recognizing that maybe you're frustrated by all the things you were just talking about and saying, "Hey, don't worry about it. Be yourself." I mean, for so many years, when I remember Dave Holland told me when Coltrane first joined Miles, he kept coming up to Miles and saying, "What do you want me to play? What do you want me to play?" Miles kept turning his back on him. And
Yeah.
Train finally realized, oh, he wants me to be myself. Not that you can just go off in some frenzied, Beaver Harris freeform jazz jam, but the truth is, was somebody in the band able to sort of say, "Hey, man, we brought you in to be yourself. Don't you're
Exactly.
doing
Yeah.
great."
Yeah, that's exactly it. I can say I'm very guilty of questioning myself and my just I guess my abilities and whatnot. When I'm called up for a session, or for example, when I joined Orgone or started our own group Jungle Fire and stuff, is that a lot of times I would question it because and I'll be honest, there's amazing drummers out there, and there's amazing drummers that could run circles around me, technically or visually or whatever, they're there. And I would always just kind of doubt myself and kind of put myself down, that it's like, oh man, you're not good enough, you're not this and that. But it's exactly what you're saying, that it comes down to, it's it's your individuality, it's what you bring, it's the pictures that you paint, like it's your
Exactly.
specific feel that works. It's that sort of thing. It's the right tool for those sort of things, and it's the energy that you bring that brings the energy to those songs, that sort of thing. So it really is just people around you saying like, no, you're doing this because you do this right. You don't have to be Neil Peart. You don't have to be John Bonham. You don't have to be Earl Palmer. It's like you don't have
Exactly,
to be
dude.
these, but you're really just kind of, you take the elements, like I mentioned Tony Allen. I mean, he's a huge influence on me because I mean his touch is impeccable. He's not the most amazing drummer in the world. He's not going to sit there and you know do a drum battle with somebody, even though he'd smoke him in his own way. But it's it's his touch and his feel and what
Oh
he
my
brings to a
God,
specific
man.
song. You know what I'm saying? Um,
No,
and
I want to just say that, like, because that stuff, I lived on that for several years, just consistently betting myself with Fela. And, it's not, I don't get off on people's, playing facility. I wind up staring at the wall if it doesn't feel good. But like Tony Allen, like, it's not the most complex stuff, but it's very
but it is.
repetitive, but it feels so good. And so
Yeah,
that's all that matters.
yeah, yeah. That's one thing is there's a lot of bands and stuff that play Afrobeat, some much better than others. But for me personally, it comes down to like, okay, what's the drummer doing? Is he trying to be all up front doing his thing, or does you can tell if somebody's really studied Tony Allen or not. I mean, there's some
Mm.
cats out there that I mean, they've mastered, or I shouldn't say mastered, but they've really gotten the language down. Just the touch and yeah, really the language. Like you said, like it may not be the most difficult, but when you actually really break it down, it is.
And
Either
that's the other
whether
thing is just what can you say to me or the audience about, because with a lot of African music, Fela included, it sounds incredibly complex, but in that classic African tradition, when you pull and when everybody has their separate parts, you pull
Yeah,
those apart and then everybody's doing it together. So it's at,
yeah.
I mean,
It's the
how do
claves.
right, and those cats, I mean, when they were recording albums, I don't think there was a lot of overdubbing, which means they were all pretty much hitting at the same time, which
Oh
is
yeah,
amazingly impressive. I mean,
oh yeah.
I mean, I guess my question is with your band, the uh what's Jungle what?
Jungle Fire.
Jungle Fire. And
Yeah.
that's the Afrobeat band.
It's not Afrobeat. I mean, it incorporates Afrobeat in itself, but it also incorporates, traditional Colombian, Cuban rhythms. But it's kind of like if you took, those elements and then added like funk behind it,
I
strong
love it, dude.
backbeats or yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Well, no, I was gonna say like how have you sort of that was my question was kind of what makes your that band unique? I mean, I don't mind going to see well, I shouldn't
well,
say I
I
mean I
think
don't
what
mind
makes
yeah.
yeah, I
Go ahead.
think what makes it unique as far as that band is that the the band is fronted by three percussionists up front. And as I mentioned, like a lot of it is based around specific language that they know and that they speak in, where, and then, some of the horn lines, it's not, like they could be playing a salsa rhythm or something, but the horns aren't playing salsa. The rhythm section's not playing salsa.
Exactly. Yeah.
You may have specific rhythms that are happening up front, and the bass and drums are literally just, driving like a J beast sort of beat,
Hmm.
you can have horns or the guitars just doing some picking or doing some psychedelic groove over it or something. It's really just taking these different languages, putting it together. But, coming from the rhythm, there's the clave. Okay, where's the clave at? And then, okay, I'm on the drums. Am I the backbeat or am I playing in between of what they're playing? And then the bass line's going to keep it down solid. He's not trying to, go off and be the rock star,
Right.
and then
Right.
everybody finding their place, and like you said, when you strip it down, there's specific parts that may not be so difficult. And then when you put them together, it sounds very difficult. And what makes it difficult is being able to keep the conversation going, so you
Oh
would say.
my God. I mean, that's the part
Yeah.
when you have making it feel good. I mean,
Yeah.
what you're describing is like it's all a weave, it's just weaving.
Yeah. Yep.
Do you feel
And
like
that's
that was
that's the magic.
absolutely, and that's what I get off on. I mean, just in terms of like kind of my intro that I was talking about, it's such a I don't know even know what this just put talking about like being a road dog musician in this time is just so interesting if you're playing original spiritual music. Carlos Santana or Tower of Power or bands that already have some sort of name recognition. I mean, they can make millions of dollars and go out for 3 weeks, and that's great. But it's just regurgitating the old stuff in some way, and I mean, more power to them, I guess. But all those cats were making original music, which because the A&R guys like David Rubinson and other people were hip to that stuff, it got commodified because there was a record-based music industry, and they became the bands they are today, and that does not exist so in today's world. So have you guys been able to road dog it? And I guess more to the point, how does Sam Alterman deal with long stretches of inactivity on the bandstand? Obviously, you can go shed, but I'm just talking
Yeah.
about like for me now, like once a week, I have to go and get stuff out of my system. Otherwise, I sort of become a little bit, I'm off, and I just always wonder about the serious musicians who are making original music, how they keep themselves together during extended breaks, just because, I mean, live touring musicians, it's just tough these days.
Yeah, yeah. So you were saying outside of actually playing.
You can riff
Um,
on it both ways. I mean,
yeah,
have you done
no.
a lot of road dogging, and then what do you do when you don't when you're idle?
Yeah, I mean, I've done a lot of road dogging. I can say in the off time, I'm a pretty avid surfer, so the
Oh,
ocean
sweet,
itself,
dude. No,
yeah,
yeah.
the ocean for
Well, then
me
you just answered the
is,
question, man.
yeah,
Dude,
there you go.
that's
Yeah,
so
that and
sick,
spending
man.
time with loved ones. To be honest, I'm actually not on the road right now with Oregon Rhythm Section
Really?
is the backing band for this group called Say She, which we recorded a record with. And I've been staying home for most of this year because me and my lady, we're gonna be having a baby boy October 5th.
Huh.
So I've been staying home and being part of the home life and whatnot. And it's hard to step away from it, considering that most of my life has been road dogging it, touring, doing that sort of thing. And you know, I'll tell you, it's never been luxurious. I've never board where I have 5-star hotels every night and everybody building my shit.
I'm digging
I've
it,
been in
bro. Yeah, I dig.
situations where I'm playing, and I'm working and I'm setting up my gear and all that stuff. So when I'm home, it almost feels strange to not be doing it. And you gotta kind of have that fill. And my fill is yes, like I gotta surf. I gotta, excuse me, hang out with the friends. I gotta shed, you know, you find just other things that
Yeah,
fill you
yeah.
up. And now I'm going to be having a kid, so that's going to be my life, and
Well, I mean, I got to be honest. I'm just speaking with having a 17-year-old and 11-year-old. I can honestly tell you the time to go on the road is before the baby is born. But that's cool. I mean, I want to say this right now. My kids, both of them, and this doesn't work for everybody. Some people feel an immense amount of responsibility, so they work harder than ever. Being with I was reborn. There is a rebirth
yeah,
that goes on that it happens differently with everybody, but I'm just saying you're about to enter a vector of your creative life where you
yeah,
can really start to dream again. I mean, you're already surfing, so I mean, those you're already kind of in an elevated state. I'm just saying,
yeah,
man, it's the best. It's the greatest thing in the world just because you're down on this level again. It's almost music because they're not verbal. You're not having typical conversations that you would have in your day in, day out life. You're on the floor, like, in a visceral, guttural phase, just really. And then all of a sudden it's like, wow, anything is possible. So for me, it was
yeah.
like, yeah, I'm going to just go. Dude, everybody's just a person. And I'm going to go after McLaughlin and I'm going to go after Bill Cosby before the world caved in on him as a rogue journalist. So, like, I think this is actually the timing of this is phenomenal because you know what? Yeah, it's going to be a blissful, amazing, interesting, wild experience. But then you're going to have to support your family, and you're going to have to go back out and you're going to be a different cat completely.
Of course, and like you said, yeah, I really do see it as a new birth.
Hmm.
I've had a lot of friends tell me that too. But what's great is, you mentioned the creative element of it. I think what's great is that having a new life, you know, um, will definitely bring those part those parts out in me. Different parts of the brain that are now sparking again. The left, the right, the upper, the lower, all that
Exactly, dude.
kind of communicating again and allowing me the creative pulse to happen again. And with that, reflecting it towards my boy, is I really look forward to that. And yes, I want to be around and I want to be him, be there for him. And but that creative process is still going to exist. And if I do go on tour, then I go on tour. And I think it'll help me there and it gives me life and hope when I come home. And the thing is I don't know what's really going to happen after I have a kid, but I can tell you that
No, yeah, it's true, man. You're right. You're right.
the
Yeah.
music's in my blood though. And I'll always be working with people, even if I decide to venture other ways. And again, that could be a whole new another creative process.
You nailed
Um,
it because, like,
yeah.
dude, I'm telling you, man. I mean, it's not for everybody. Some people they don't want to have kids, and I respect that. I'm just saying it's so evident for me that, I mean, we're just getting hip to each other, but my like my being myself. I mean, it was not always like a huge struggle, but I fully was like liberated. Like it was just like the creative part of it was like, yo, life is real. This is not even a miracle. This is just total rebirth. I'm going to go for it. I'm going to go over the edge. I'm going to inspire people. And I mean, you've been
Exactly.
doing that already on the bandstand, but that is going to, yeah, maybe he won't be a great sleeper and you'll be a little bit sleep deprived or whatever.
I'll
But I mean,
sleep when I'm dead. No.
yeah, exactly. That's a Mickey Hart line. You sleep when you're dead. But it's
Yeah.
going. You are going to get so much rejuvenation creatively. It's going to spark, and you can see that with certain musicians who have, because you get to this point in your life, a lot of them do, where they make a real conscious effort to say, music is my life. I'm not going to
Mhm.
have a family, and that's beautiful. And some of them still can reach that incredibly playful, vulnerable place and be a very engaging, sort of inclusive person. And then there's other people who are like, it's just you're a little too cool for school. And I think it's just like, I think it's so beautiful that at this point in your career that you're going to have this life come in, because it's really just about being more vulnerable, breaking open the
Yeah.
heart, and then just like,
Yeah.
and then all these new opportunities are old up, but you're going to be it's just going to be a beautiful experience. And yeah, I mean, it was the best it was really the best thing that's ever happened in my life. It's just so that's such a wonderful thing. I am surprised you are not trying to go out and road dog you before he comes.
Well, my partner and I, we were, we were talking about this and whatnot. I can admit that this wasn't necessarily planned, but
Sure.
and we weren't sure if we ever really wanted the kids, but that's besides the point. But
Right. It's over now. Yeah.
we are well,
Yeah.
and because we're doing this and it's a decision together, and I love her to death, that I just want to be there for the whole process. We're doing it a little different. We're doing a whole natural birth, and using hypnotherapy and stuff for her, and this just gives me time to like kind of set myself up and get ready, and be home for her so that she's in a good state of mind of when we're going to have this birth, and it's important to me. So
That's beautiful. I mean,
and this
yeah.
is probably one of the busiest times that I would be touring. Like
Right.
I had this guy Gus who um studies all my music down to nuances that I forgot that I even did, and out there filling in for me. And there's a young cat that hasn't been to Europe, and so he's probably loving it and living life, and I'm happy to have him do that. And when the time is right, then I will tour again. But as I said, this is a point in my life to where I feel it's necessary to be home. I know people say, and like you said, that you get all the touring in you can before you go, but when you're coming down in the months, I don't want to be on tour and all of a sudden it's like, oh, hey, I'm going into early labor, and that sort of thing. So, and just
Honestly,
a,
your
a, a bonding
intentions,
moment.
yeah.
Yeah, our
No,
bonding moment as a couple is very important to me before we bring a life into this world. So,
no, I mean, sounds like you got a really good head on your shoulders. I'm gonna run through you asked me, you were like, I was like reaching out to you and you're like, I don't even know what's your show about, man. And I was like, so just want to run through, um, talk to me about whether or not you've ever been a band leader is irrelevant. Talk about what you believe are the best qualities of leadership on the bandstand.
oh man, the best qualities is, I mean, really working harder than everybody else that's working for you. Um, being,
What does that
being
mean?
there.
What does that mean exactly?
So, I mean, if you're a leader, if they say like you got to set an example, and if you're the leader of a band, if you're not working harder than everybody else that say is in the band, well, then what is it? Where's it going to
Right,
go? You
right,
know what I'm saying?
right,
It's
right,
like
right. You set the
you're the
bar.
yeah, you set the bar, and And if that's not enough and people are looking at it like, okay, this is all you got, then they're either going to surpass you and you're not the leader anymore, or it's just not going to happen. You know, you're only as strong as your weakest link. And if you're the leader and you're the weakest link, well, there it goes. You know what I'm saying? Um, but yeah, obviously communication skills, being aware of your surroundings, being willing to take, a blow based on somebody else,
Hmm.
um, the, like I said, I'm not the leader of any band. I'm very kind of just mutual with,
Well,
the
after
bands I play in.
after fatherhood, that might change, dude. No, I'm
I
with you.
can't say that I've taken on a lot of responsibilities with everybody, that I work with and whatnot, maybe more than sometimes I can swallow. Um, but I wouldn't consider myself a leader of any sort of situation,
I dig.
because
No, I
anything
mean,
that,
but
yeah.
yeah. No, I think also like it's important. Some people say to me they've learned. I mean, you're talking about the work ethic, but they've also, there's other things where you learn what not to do. You
Oh,
sort of,
that's, yeah.
yeah.
Isn't that always the number one lesson?
I think so. I think it's very Zen kind of thing, but you have to be really awake and really perceptive to package that in. Tell me about your the lineage of your playing. I mean, how far does it go back? Is it Zigaboo? Is it Sid Catlett? Is it Papa Joe Jones? I mean, Tony Allen we've talked about, but what other influences in music and drummers specifically are part of your lineage?
Well, it's funny because when I first started, I picked up sticks maybe when I was like 9. As a
Right.
toddler, I was like banging on pots and pans.
Sure.
That's what any drummer will tell you. And
Absolutely.
so then as a kid, when I was like, okay, yeah, I want to play drums. The people that influenced me weren't necessarily like my teachers that I had. They may listen to things that I wasn't necessarily listening to, but obviously, like John Bonham was, I think, the first drummer that I was turned on to.
Hmm.
Him and Buddy Rich. My grandfather was a huge Buddy Rich and Gene Krupa
That's awesome.
fan.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was like, hey, okay, learn this. And so falling into that, learning it, and then I had a drum teacher that was obsessed with Van Halen. So it's like, okay, you're gonna learn some Alex's shit. And it's like, okay. And then moving along, and then I grew up in like the 90s and stuff, and so of course like the grunge rock and all that. Just I was more of playing to tracks. If I got a hold of a CD, it's like, okay, I'm just gonna listen to these songs and I'm just gonna learn it and learn it and learn it. And then jazz band in high school. Unfortunately, we didn't have the best uh, jazz program there. I wouldn't even really consider it a jazz class, even though we played. A lot of it was kind of big band stuff. That's
Sure.
where. Um, and but then from there, it was just playing, and then I really got into hip hop and introduced to that, and I was all about just like the backbeats and stuff. And then of course that turned me on to James Brown and the funk of just like you're there to play a groove. And it's like, oh, dude, I love doing this. I don't need to play crazy, because at one point in high school, it's like, yeah, I got to learn the double bass pedal. I got to learn this, and I studied it. I did, and then I walked away from it because I was like, this isn't what I really want to do. Like, I
Wow.
want to,
Wow.
I
I
want to
love
play.
you the groove, man. Yes, the groove.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's about the groove, and so I did that, and that's what got me where I am today. Um, and so I've never really been the guy, to be honest, like I'm kind of like the shy guy. I don't put myself out there as an Instagrammer or an influencer and stuff, like I've just never been that person.
I
I
dig,
just
man. No,
wanted
I
to play
dig. Yeah.
drums, man, and that's what I do. And I can say like, so many drummers have influenced me, from the past and current. But what it comes down to is the people that influence me are the band members that I have. Because if they hear something and I play it, or if I play something and they hear it and it creates something, well, then that's what matters, you know? And of course, yeah, that's influenced by somebody, but what music isn't, you
Well,
know?
ultimately, it's like you said. you can comp stuff to death and learn stuff to death, but then it's like, I mean, we all beg, borrow, and steal as a broadcaster. I've, certainly have my influences, but then, how do you cut above the morass of everybody else and find your own individual voice? And I know that's sort of really the forever journey. So, Brother
Yeah.
Halterman, I mean, I'm going to save the other two L's because I'd like to do set two with you after you've brought a new life into the world, or your wife has. Be really cool
Yeah.
to do set two down, and really ultimately when I get out to the California area, I'd love to come and do a video interview with you as well, man. I mean, you don't have to be an influencer, but so much of my show is about connecting humanity using technology really through rhythm. And don't ask me how it happened, but you're one of the cats. So I mean, you
Hey,
can
well, I
keep the low
appreciate
profile and
that,
let other
man.
people blow you
Yeah.
up. But it was really it's cool, man. I really, really love your tenor. Also, there's a band that you need to get hip to because you remind me of this cat who's also an amazing surfer. Not amazing. I mean, he's just a surfer. But are you hip to this band Mapache?
Mapache. I can't say I am. Is it
Okay, so I just
Mapach?
yeah, it's a raccoon in Spanish, Mapache.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And anyway, at some point you guys should definitely connect because anyway, Clay and Sam are the front guys, but they're just legendary cats. And Clay's a big surfer, so you guys would definitely catch a hang. They're an amazing. They just added. They were an acoustic duo for many years, and then they just added bass and drums, and it's really, really smoking electric.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's good
Yeah,
stuff, man.
I'll check it out.
Stay in touch,
Sounds
man.
cool.
It was such an honor to hang with you, man. I'll have this up later tonight, and we'll do part two down the road. And congratulations, man. Your life is going to be a lot fuller, man. It's going to be awesome.
Beautiful, man. Thank
No,
you. Well,
man.
I appreciate the chance to interview with you. So thank you.
All right, brother. Be cool, man.
You as well.
All
Ciao.
right, peace. Yeah.